The Shift is brought to you by SE Healthcare. Welcome to The Shift. I'm Dr. Andrea Coyle. Welcome back, Shifties, to the next episode of the Shift podcast, brought to you by SE Healthcare. We're a company that is so laser focused on clinician burnout. We measure, monitor, and help manage burnout. And today I have a very unique, interesting guest that I'm really excited to introduce to y'all. I could never do her introduction justice. So KV, I'm going to kick it over to you. If you would introduce yourself to the Shifties, that would be amazing.
Thanks so much, Andrea. So my name is Katherine Virkstis. A lot of people call me KV. Don't try to say my last name. It usually doesn't go well. But I answer to, hey, Katherine or KV or hey, you or whatever works. And I am GetWell's Chief Clinical Officer. GetWell is a patient engagement technology platform, and I've been with GetWell for about 3 years. Prior to joining GetWell, I worked for a company called the Advisory Board, which is a best practice research company where I ran their clinical research and their nursing executive center. And I'm trained as a primary care physician. So I was in private practice for several years before joining Advisory Board.
Wow. So here's a fun fact to all the Shifties. I'm KV and we're just chit-chatting over the last couple of months, and I'm thinking, she's a nurse. Like, I know she's a nurse, and she sprung on me that she's a physician. Tell the story of how many nurses you had to collaborate with throughout your whole career, and talk about the shifts that you made in your career.
Yeah, so it's interesting because when I joined the Advisory Board company, it was like one conversation led to another. I had actually just had my son, and we followed my husband's career path, and that brought us to Washington, D.C. And I was trying to decide where I wanted to kind of have my next practice, and is it D.C. or Virginia or Maryland? And licensure matters, and my license had been in Vermont. And a friend said, you should just think about this company, the Advisory Board. And when I joined, they had a need to have a research lead over the Nursing Executive Center, which, as the name implies, is the research program that serves chief nursing officers and their broader leadership teams. And I immediately just really connected with everybody that I was working with. These are people who are clinicians, who are leaders, who sit in boardrooms, who walk the halls and walk the units and talk to patients, and they do it all in high heels, and they just impressed me so much, and we really connected. I think we had so much in common. But what's interesting is I, in some ways, have kind of come full circle in my career. I'm not a nurse, I'm not a registered nurse, but I did start my career as an EMT and was brought into a hospital while I was young, while I was in school doing my undergrad, getting a degree in biology. I worked at a small hospital in Vermont, which at the time was called the Fanny Allen Hospital, and was asked to kind of wear a pager, as many years ago. Don't ask me how many, more than 25, and would walk the hall, would basically go wherever I was needed. And so if help was needed in the ED and I could just start IVs or assist with a code, I would do that. Or if someone was needed to take vital signs on the entire long-term care floor or change bedpans, I did that. And I worked with a team of nurses. So I reported up through the nursing team. And so it's just been a very interesting career path for me.
I have to tell you, when you shared your career path and all the shifts that you made, it's actually a great story. And it's a great story. So thank you for sharing that. KV, share with us. Often we talk about burnout. Burnout's a hot topic, no pun intended. Um, in your current role as a chief clinical officer at GetWell, when you're on site, whether it's with people in the care delivery environment or at the leadership level, what does burnout look like, sound like in what you've observed?
Yeah. I think what I hear the most is I really just want to provide excellent care. I want to be present in the work that I do. And yet I feel ragdolled or pulled in too many directions. And the data point that sticks out in my mind, and this comes to me from the great Sharon Pappas, who's the system CNE at Emory, and she has been an amazing peer and advisor and friend. And she gave me this data point. Every hour, on average, nurses are interrupted 9 times. And that doesn't sound like that much, but it's every 6 minutes. Every 6 minutes, you've got to stop what you're doing, go do something else, and come back to it. And when you stop and come back, you can never really go back to the exact same spot where you left. I was telling you earlier, Andrea, it's a little bit like when I don't know if you listen to an audiobook, but you can never like quite start exactly where you stopped. You've got to back up a little bit and kind of get your bearings. And so what that leads to is each individual responsibility now takes longer than it should. And that's, over time, that's really going to add up. And it's not only like cognitive burden, it's not only a mental load, but it's physically like just taking longer. And that leads to falling behind. It leads to deciding to skip breaks. I don't have time to go to the bathroom. I don't have time to go grab lunch. It leads to postponing deferrable work. It leads to a delay in time sensitive things. And ultimately, that leads to the things that, that we are trying to avoid always, missed documentation, missed care, errors, sentinel events, all those things. So when I talk to nurses, what I really think people need is the ability to be present and to not feel pulled in so many directions.
I think that's incredible. And when at SE Healthcare, we actually gather data and we can put together through artificial intelligence and machine learning based on the autonomous voice of the nurse, the top stressors and the clinical care delivery environment, as well as the leader environment. If we look at the clinical care delivery environment, workload and workload's typically high on the list. And what you're describing, and we talked about this before we started recording this episode, is it's stacked care. And
Yeah.
when all that care or all those tasks start to stack up, something's not going to get completed. And that leads to lack of self-efficacy. Like, I'm working so hard, what's the use? And then often clinicians, whether nurses, physicians, respiratory therapists, it doesn't matter. When that happens, you go home and you feel like you're not providing the care that you really signed up to do. And that all contributes to burnout. And the other thing that we talked about, KV, is, and I hear this often, I truly hear this often, especially, and this is probably not a surprise to many, people over the age of 45, technology contributes to a lot of their burnout because it's continuous change fatigue and learning new technology. Do you ever hear that in the environment?
I do. And I I think where technology falls short is when it's designed by someone else without the end user in mind. And we bring the direct care teams in at the point of implementation. And when we do that, it's too late because it's already been designed in such a way that it doesn't account for the real realities of how it would work in practice. And so there's a saying that was given to me by Monique Bouvier, who also is at Emory. She works together with Sharon, and she says, "Hey, technology's got to work for nurses, not the other way around." And it's just such a great mantra. But if we aren't really taking into account what are the realities of that day-to-day practice, and it doesn't matter how good it looks on paper, it doesn't matter how good it looks on a, kind of an algorithm. It's got to really work in practice.
So I have a question. And can you shout out in your work with GetWell, so, name some of the organizations that really put nurses, the end users, in the whole development of how the technology workflow is going to look like? Which organizations do it well, and how do they do it so that for the listeners, they can take this away as a lesson learned?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I can speak personally to GetWell because that's where I
Right.
am today.
And by the way, shout out to Michael O'Neill, right? We'll shout out to him.
Michael O'Neill. I mean, I think it's worth just sharing his story because very quickly, if you don't mind, because he is like
Yes,
GetWell was started by a patient. He was that patient. And I don't know if you know the story
I
of.
know the full story. Yes, but I'd love for you to share it. And then we can get Michael to come on the podcast at some point.
I love that idea. So Michael was 28 years old in law school at Georgetown Law and had abdominal pain. And he went to the clinic and the student clinic, and he was sort of dismissed and told, "Oh, you have a law student ulcer, quote unquote. Everyone gets one." And off they sent him, and with Prilosec or whatever, and he said, "No, no, no, really, something's not right." Back and forth to the clinic, and finally landed in a hospital bed where he was approached by a team of doctors and nurses who said, "Hey, we found a tumor the size of an orange in your abdomen, and it's non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is a type of cancer." And then they walked away. And there he was all by himself and didn't have the tools or but just didn't understand what was happening to him. And he turned to his nurse and said, "Is there anything I can watch or read to understand what's happening to me? I'm not medical." And I think the nurses at the time dealt with what they had. This was in 1999, so 25 years ago. They wheeled out the giant cart and with the television on it and the VCR and pressed play. And what played in that moment was a breastfeeding video. I'm not kidding, true story. And that would be the moment where I would completely lose it. So he said, he sketched out a business plan from the hospital bed and said, "We're going to make this better for the next one up. We're going to design technology that's going to help empower patients with more tools so they have more control over their care." So all this to say, fast forward to today and where we are at GetWell and what we do, a big component of what we are focused on is making sure that the technology works not only for the patients, but also for the care teams. And just another note about patient experience and care team experience, because I really feel like GetWell is a patient experience company from it, like the heart of it. It's from its core DNA is patient experience. But I really see the care team's experience and the patient's experience really tightly linked, and not to oversimplify the many factors that can shape one's own personal experience. Suffice it to say that a good day for a patient contributes to a good day for a nurse and vice versa. And unfortunately, the flip of that is true. If a nurse is feeling ragdolled and exhausted and pulled in too many different directions, that emanates. People can feel that and to some extent even absorb that. So how do we shift our lens from a shift? I hadn't even thought about that.
I love that.
How do we shift our lens from patient experience to no, the human experience? Because it's inclusive. It's inclusive of the care team. It's inclusive of the family. It's inclusive of friends. Everyone who's rallying around the care of that patient. So back to get well. One thing we're doing right now to try to, we're in the midst of all the other things that people are doing around AI and virtual care and all the different things that we can do to help build technology to support the human experience. We're creating design collaboratives. So and doing this through the lens of like how can we really have nurse-led and care team-led design? So let's start with the burden. What slows the care team down? What distracts from care? What causes stress? That the innovation we're building should be designed to like support those friction points.
I
Um,
love that.
and then let's co-design together with engineers, with AI engineers, with technology people, and to iterate and make sure that and test it and make sure that it's designed to actually give nurses time back, not take it away.
Hey, V, thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing Michael's story. It's a great story. I heard him speak in San Diego many years ago, and it's a powerful, powerful story. And when you think about the patient experience, the nurse experience, but let's just call it the human experience, burnout, to your point, impacts the nurse experience, the patient experience, the family experience, the care team experience. Because when people are in the grips of burnout, they're not their best. They're not engaged. Patients aren't getting the care they deserve. And physicians, nurses, and all care deliverers go home and feel like their hair's on fire. What's the use? And so when we do create technology to support the care delivery environment, it's a win-win, but we must do it, to your point, with the people that are in that, they're functioning in that care delivery environment. And I think, I have to shout out to SC Healthcare, what we do. And I'm pretty sure I shared this whole story with you, KV, but I'll make it super short and sweet. We actually create a culture of awareness of what burnout looks like, sounds like, feels like. I hear in my work that some nurse leaders, oh, we don't even have burnout. Well, I know that that's not true, because if you look at anything that Becker's puts out, burnout is real. You listen to the World Health Organization, Magnet's focused on some of their standards, Pathway, PTAP. Some will say, I don't like the word burnout. Okay, I get it, but we have to name it, claim it, and tame it. And it is called burnout.
Yeah.
And then what we do after we create this environment of awareness, because many don't even know the signs and symptoms of burnout. And some of them are technology. So, or some of them are those tasks that continue to build upon each other. SC Healthcare is the complete package. We're very comprehensive. Not only do we collect and measure and monitor data that helps guide decisions and guide strategy, we have an enrichment center that's digital, and we have micro learnings that help clinicians set boundaries, that help clinicians understand what a psychologically safe environment looks like. What does Maslow's hierarchy look like? And when we put all those tasks on top of each other, we're missing our bathroom breaks. Well,
Yeah.
that's defeating Maslow's hierarchy, right? So this is what SC Healthcare does, and I think it really we're all playing in the same sandbox here, truly.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of Maslow, you're touching on something that I think is so important and has to be part of a discussion on not just burnout, but also like how do we find safety and get back to joy, and that is point of care aggression and violence, and that is a very real thing, and we continue to see numbers that are alarming. And I'll tell you one quick story. Not too long ago, I was on a flight, and it was a Southwest flight. And the Southwest model is you choose wherever you want to sit, and you're not allowed to save seats. They're very serious. They take that very seriously. And the gentleman in the row directly in front of me had taken the window seat and had placed his bag on the aisle seat. And the flight attendant came up to him immediately and said, "Oh, hey, just want to let you know, we have an open seating policy. You can't save seats. I need you to move your bag." And she walked away, and he didn't do anything. And she came back and she said, "No, seriously, I need you to move your bag." And she walked away again, and still nothing happened. And she came back a third time and said, "Sir, I'm asking you to remove your bag. Are you going to comply?" And he said nothing. All he did was stare back at her, didn't move his bag. He just stared back at her and ignored her. And guess what happened?
What?
It took about 30 seconds, and she picked up the phone, and security was there. And he did not fly. He was removed from the plane. And this is when I had this light bulb moment that, oh, in healthcare, we can't remove the patient from the plane. We still have to care for the patient who's been aggressive or violent, and this is not even someone who's been, violent. It was just not being compliant, not listening, not following the rules. And so this is another place where I really feel technology can help. Technology can help promote civility and help promote a safer care environment. So it's another thing we've been working on within GetWell. How can we raise awareness? How can we identify the early warning signs? How can we speed time to response? How can we look for patterns so that we can prevent it from happening in the first place? So that's all stuff that we've been working on at GetWell as well.
And I love we're really we're really creating this culture of awareness.
Mhm.
That's what we have to do. I thought you were going to say that the gentleman was hard of hearing. That's where I thought your story, and that's a very actually incredibly compelling story. It's a very powerful story. And there's a lot of truth to that in healthcare for sure.
It shows how healthcare is different. In every other industry, the answer is send the person away, remove them, call security and have them removed. It's different in healthcare. We've got to still care for patients, and that creates a daily and regular stress for people who are, tend to be the object of that aggression.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that story. So KV, what we typically do at the end of the episode is we share 2 or 3 takeaways so the shifties can just walk away feeling empowered. I always say that, the most important KPIs are to keep people involved, interested, and inspired. And what are 2 takeaways? I took a few, but I want you to say them because you say it way better than I do.
I think, well, what's interesting, Andrea, is I probably said a few of them already, that my takeaways. So I actually hadn't thought about this, but I think if a nurse doesn't help design it, it's probably not going to end up helping in the end.
That's a good one.
So that's an important one. And I also think a big part of our answer in the future to helping to reduce cognitive burden has to be technology. We're going to need to lean on it. We can't be afraid of it. We need to embrace it, and we need to do so in such a way that we're bringing the end users in at every step of the way.
And I'm going to tag on that, KV, and say, when you get the clinician, whether it's a nurse or physician, involved in any type of implementation, that reduces the risk of change fatigue and that decreases burnout. And I mean, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to make this the best human experience possible. So with that, I want to thank you, KV. I'd love for you to come back on, and then we'll talk later. Let's see if we can get Michael on the show, tell his story, because it's a great story. And I always end by saying, shifties, remember, your shift makes a difference. Keep shifting. Enjoying the shift? Help us reach more nurse leaders by rating and reviewing us on your podcast app. It takes just a minute, but makes a big impact. Search for The Shift, tap those stars, and share what you love. Your feedback shapes our future episodes and helps others discover us. Remember, rate, review, and amplify The Shift today.